Victims of Jeffrey Epstein continue to voice opposition to a potential pardon of Ghislaine Maxwell.
Teresa Helm, who was abused by Epstein and testified against Maxwell, told MSNBC a pardon would mean the complete crumbling of the justice system. President Trump says he's allowed to give Maxwell a pardon, but it's not something he's thought about. The comments come amid intense scrutiny of Trump's use of pardons. Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee recently released a report saying Trump's pardon spree will deprive victims and taxpayers of more than $1 billion in restitution. The Hill's Washington correspondent Drew Petrimo recently sat down with a former Arkansas state senator pardoned by the president. Listen to his thoughts on the podcast.
There's some really bad dudes in prison. Some of the best guys I ever met are also in prison. And some of them deserve grace and more than I do. And for me to be able to walk out and leave them there, it was tough.
He was in the studio this morning with us to talk more about this just fascinating conversation you had.
Yeah, thanks. I think what thing people might focus on from that is that he kind of acknowledges there that there are other people in the system that deserve grace more than he does. And I think while Hutchinson does have some righteous criticisms of the way his case was handled and the federal criminal justice system at large, there's these instances where prosecutors use the threat of long prison sentences to hang them over the heads and force people to take plea agreements. There's this issue of relevant conduct, where this is basically how judges can consider evidence that a defendant hasn't been convicted of or tried of when doing sentencing, and consider how harsh of a sentence will be rendered. This evidence that has never seen the light of a courtroom before. Fair points if you're going to talk about the criminal justice system in that way. The problem critics say, though, is the way these pardons are being handled by the Trump administration, circumventing the normal DOJ process. Trump's pardon attorney, the guy who's kind of leading this process up right now, Ed Martin Jr., he's a Trump loyalist and has openly talked about using the pardon process to help Trump supporters and hurt his enemies. It should also be noted that Senator Hutchinson, who you saw in that interview, comes from a prominent family in Arkansas. His father was a United States senator. His uncle was the governor. So he's a prominent member of the Arkansas political community, and some critics might say that's why he was considered for this pardon.
Which probably adds to his gratefulness, right? I mean, he seems deeply grateful in that little clip you showed, and yet he seems to suggest that, he's lucky.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's in a little bit of a difficult spot there. He was supposed to serve 8 years in prison. He only served 2. He got out by Trump's pardon. I think he's obviously beholden. His freedom is beholden to President Trump. But another thing I think is important to note here is you have this issue of restitution. Senator Hutchinson was supposed to pay $350,000 in restitution. That money ends up going back to the federal government to use for programs that are designed to help victims of crimes. So you have these grants that go out for these programs. There's some worry. Republicans or Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee put out a whole report last month saying that there were going to be more than $1 billion in lost money, and that would hurt these programs that are meant to help victims.
So we know all pardons aren't created equal. We were talking about Ghislaine Maxwell potentially getting, obviously her crimes and the crimes she helped Jeffrey Epstein commit are awful. What did Senator Hutchinson do? What was he convicted of?
So there was a multi-pronged investigation. Basically what the accusations was that he had clients, he was an attorney, he had clients that were paying him money, and then he was going to the state legislature and acting on issues that they were interested in. Okay. One of them was a dentist. He wanted a law changed, and he was working on that issue while he ended up abstaining from the vote. The accusation from the federal government was that he was taking that money as a bribe. There was also some issues with the way he was spending money that was supposed to be campaign contributions. We talked for 2 hours and he explained some of this stuff, and there are certain places where you can understand how he's describing this. But again, the justice system played out. He pled guilty, and then Trump comes in and pardons him. And I think circumventing the normal process. Usually this thing goes through the pardon office. There are all kinds of considerations about what the specifics of the case, how much time they served, whether or not there is remorse. And it's not just in this Hutchinson case. We saw what happened with the January 6 rioters, 1,500 of them, just this blanket pardon. And so it's the way that the Trump administration is conducting these pardons that's drawn the criticism of critics.
True, we've run out the clock here, but it sounds very fascinating. Where can people listen?
Yeah, so if you just go to Google and search the World and Stuff podcast, I think that's probably the best way to find me, but you can listen on Spotify, Apple, or on YouTube, but Googling is probably the best way to find it.
Look forward to hearing it.
Fascinating conversation, Drew. As always, we appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.